You wrote this article, Bitcoin creates hope for a generation found hopeless.
Yeah.
And we'll share that in the show notes so people can go read it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
What is it you're noticing then amongst young people? What is this like hopelessness you're seeing? Like I see it.
Yeah.
And I have 2 kids as well.
Yeah. I think in general, it's kind of, definitely COVID was a big thing. So I've been in my current role for like 4.5 years now, and a lot of my staff go into schools and work with students. So during COVID, we were all virtual. And I think it's one of those things, it's not a cognizant, youth are outright coming and speaking up about what's troubling. They're young people, they're teenagers. But what we're seeing is just like COVID had such a big effect on school age kids all over the world, but in the United States as well. And I think what you're seeing is just the biggest, and what society is doing. I think they're holding up incredibly well, given what they've been through. And especially like some of these young adults we work with, they are 15, 16, and they're working, jobs until 9 o'clock at night, also providing for their families because they're immigrant family or their parents might be undocumented, whatever. So there's these kids that are really like carrying their communities and really doing cool stuff. And society's like, what was that recent Wall Street Journal article that was saying, okay, it's millennials and younger generation buying too much. That's why inflation keeps going up, right?
Yeah.
So it's even,
what the fuck was that all about?
Yeah, it's petty stuff like that, but it's also like Greta Thunberg saying the world is burning, like we have to do something today. So I think that overwhelming unconscious pressure they did it to millennials with my time, and they're doing it to Gen Z now. Just saying like, you guys are going to pay, Social Security and probably not get any back. You guys need to fix the planet because the older people don't care about it. And that's also presupposing that if you're older, you can't change your ways or whatever the case may be. So it's basically like, what are you guys going to do about it? And a lot of times it's spun in this message of hope, but really it's overwhelmingly just suffocating, I think, to young people. And so for them to actually thrive in this world, it's really challenging. And obviously from this article, I think one of the ways is Bitcoin and the whole ethos of it, not just the technology, but.
Yeah, and I think there's other pressures on kids these days. 2 pressures that really stand out to me. Parents aren't about as much. Like I'm conscious myself as a parent, the amount I've worked, the amount I've focused on a career, ahead of spending time with my children. I'm away for a week, 2 weeks at a time. Yeah, I'm conscious of that, and I'm fortunate to have the job I have. But some people are out of like they've got no choice; they have to work 1, 2 jobs. Both parents have to work. They just don't have the time to parent. Yeah, and parenting has been kind of pushed to media, and we've got these addictive social media platforms that are, well, God knows what they're doing to their brains. But I think there's this unrealistic career life goals that it's putting in front of them. Because when I grew up, so when I was, the internet was I was about 14 when it came around. So, you went to school and you knew you were going to pick a particular vocation and you would go to university and you work hard and you get a job. Yeah. Now, with the internet, you have young people seeing other young people become fabulously rich by doing things on the internet. And all they're seeing is success stories. Yeah. It might be a 16-year-old playing for Manchester United. It might be some young girl who dances on TikTok, has 100 million followers, and you see articles that live in these big mansions or youngsters driving cars. Like, that's what they see, and that's what they aspire to. And I think a lot of them are missing the reality. Actually, no, life's just really hard. Like, none of you are going to do that. Like a tiny fraction. Most of you are going to have to work hard at school and then get a job. Yeah. And then you can throw in another layer of pressure in this. It's like a lot of the jobs that they're perhaps preparing for are not even going to fucking exist.
Yeah, that's the whole scary part too. And, working in workforce development, that's kind of one of your jobs is to try to figure out what is that going to look like in 5-10 years? Because a lot of the young people we'll work with or I'm passionate about working with or running, in my director role, a lot of this is my staff doing these things. And I try to just support funding and have conversations with people about why they should care about this or why they should invest in these young people. So we're projecting out 5-10 years, right? So what are those jobs that we can help them get into now that can be that trajectory? And that's the challenging part. Not only that, I think really I get passionate and upset about is like, we can make things a hell of a lot easier on young people. And I'll say just to the US context, but it applies worldwide. we can make things a lot easier for young people, whether you talk about like outrageous costs of higher education. And no, I don't think the only answer is debt cancellation, right? Because then what does that do to continuing payments? That's a whole nother topic, but college is too expensive. Training programs might be too expensive. Employers, they might get a job, but then we've seen layoffs this year, so we could be heading for a recession. Could be more serious or not, we don't know. So they're going into these companies and these organizations if they are lucky to get a job, and we're not making things easy for them when things shouldn't be easy. Let me put it that way. And these young people, I think the biggest misconception is, oh, they're lazy and they just don't want to work. No, the young people we work with, they're like super excited to get out there, and they're young. They're excited about life. They really are just like viewing the world that way. Even though some of us that are a bit older, and maybe it's my millennial angst too, is like, man, this world's kind of hard sometimes. Like, you know, and us Bitcoiners, there's hope, but there's also a message of like, oh man, all of these guys, they're the bad guys, and no one knows it but us type thing. And that's a little bit extreme, but it's partly real. And I think a lot of these things, especially politicians, in action, I don't think they care at all about a lot of people, but about this younger generation coming up. So we have to
they only care about themselves.
They only care about themselves, but I think also sometimes it's not even awareness. I think, it's tough when you don't have term limits. You come in and that becomes your career. And so you're focused on getting book deals and speaking, not necessarily on, all right, I got 5 years.
What can I do for my constituents?
Yes, that is few and far between. And I will say there are probably many out there, but I think you've mentioned this before too. Some people get co-opted, or you get into it and then you get comfortable, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, where was that fighting spirit? Where did that go?
AOC.
Right.
Like, I know she's unpopular with a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people listening, we were like, what the fuck are you on about? When AOC first came through, she was a ray of hope.
Yeah.
I mean, she might have been completely wrong on some issues.
Sure.
But she had a fight in her.
Yeah.
And now she's just been co-opted into the same bullshit.
I think it's tough. I think some of it is, okay, you want to try to get, inspire hope and change in people. So you have to be a bit bombastic at times. And what I do like about her is that there aren't many people in Congress, like even if you just follow her on Instagram, she shows you what a day in the life of so regardless of what you think of her politics, she shows you what a day in the life of a congresswoman looks like, which is kind of cool. Like, people aren't transparent about what it actually is. But then, I'll see some talks or some interviews or some like the panel, the House panel, whatever, where they're just like, this is my moment. This is my 30 seconds to blast this guy or this tech CEO. And I'm like, what did that do for your constituents? What did that do for this country? What did that do for young people? Nothing. But I get it. And a lot of us who would be in the same position, would we do any different? I'm not sure, because that machine is terribly grinding, the political machine that these people fall into.
I think there's a few pillars of this that are causing problems for kids. I think politicians, I absolutely do. The financial system, in a number of ways, has damaged kids in that there's no money for kids anymore. No. When I grew up, we used to have these things called youth clubs. Do you have youth clubs for you? But they'd gone by then.
Yeah, I never really went to a youth club.
But they were a thing, and it would just be Friday night, Thursday night, whatever. You go along, you play pool, play football. A group of people hang out. You all eventually got closed, and then football playing fields went.
Yeah.
There's just never any money for kids. There's a crash in the economy and the government suddenly needs 40 billion. That money appears.
Right.
Can you imagine they suddenly found 40 billion for kids? How many playing fields, parks, like how many things you fund? They never find that money. They always find it for the things they need.
Yeah.
So I think the financial system hasn't helped. I think the social media companies are drug dealers.
Yeah.
And
I would agree with that.
As somebody who is a previous addict and has definitely been addicted to Twitter, it is fentanyl to kids.
Yeah.
I also think the education system hasn't evolved for life. I mean, there's a really great TED talk. I think the guy sadly died. He was a teacher, and he talked about this kid who liked to dance, and everyone missed it. And he said, these kids now, we have the internet now, and these kids now, the jobs, the things he's teaching them now, they won't even need to learn in the future. Like Rich Roll, like I always steal this line he said to me. He said, the problem with schooling is we give these kids a supercomputer in their pocket and then we teach them to go and memorize facts.
Yeah.
It's fucking pointless.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the whole education system needs a complete rethink.
Yeah.
We need to create people, not mini computers who can remember things.
Yeah. And I think too, you talk a lot about this a lot on your show, and I think your show obviously talks about Bitcoin, and I think the directions you want to head is expand that too. But you talk a lot about too, and for your European listeners and others, even in the US, like how different the US is in that we have states and we have the federal government. So you talk education, that's very, I mean, the federal government, yes, but that's dictated at the state level. So Massachusetts is going to look very different than Virginia, than Texas, than California, whatever. And each city as well, and each town, they have their school board. They have a lot of control. So as with anything in politics, if of what remnant of hope you do believe, the local level impacts a lot. So in whatever ways Bitcoiners can get involved in a local level, or people that care about this stuff, not in a way of going to town hall and being like Bitcoin just for like a joke, like, you know, funny moment. That's really where it's happening, and especially school boards. So we've seen some schools do some cool and exciting things. Like for instance, instead of just having a rigid school schedule where you have 6 or 7 like periods in a day where they go through the same classes, it's like freeing up a couple of those so they can go and do an internship outside of the school, or they can. So our big thing is we try to get students out into the community as much as possible, so they can interact with real companies, so they can figure out, let me try this out. Oh, I thought I liked that. I don't like that. Let me try this out, and just give them something that's outside. And also, teachers their job is to teach and follow the curriculum. And a lot of them, unfortunately, I think they act as social workers sometimes, but their job also isn't to prepare them for the world of work or the economy, you know, in 5 years, right? That's just not, it's not because they don't care, because teachers really do care. It's that that's not their focus. So there's not a real focus on bridging that divide between school and what comes after that. And some people are better at figuring it out than others. And I think, you know, I definitely am a firm believer in like, let them experiment and fail. And some students are going to thrive in that and some aren't. So there's always going to be risk associated. There's never going to be because we don't want to create an environment where we lay out the path of every person, you know, through age 30. And it's like, okay, that's your trajectory. Now you'll be set. Like there's got to be some try and fail.
Yeah. And what about some problem solving?
Right.
What about teaching problem solving? What about teaching philosophy?
Yeah.
What about teaching, like my daughter's at a stage now with her math. Like every parent will know this. She's doing stuff I do not use in life anymore.
Yeah. No.
And you know, there's some kids who are great at math, and they're going to do math all the way through to 18. They might do further math. Yeah. They might study math at university. Great. That is a math kid who's going to take that into a job, and where they may be an economist or an engineer, where that's super useful. My daughter, I know her. She isn't going to do shit with this math, right? She's learned everything she needs to know.
Sorry if she's listening.
English, I get it. English all the way through. Yeah. Great English skills, great writing skills, great comprehension skills. That's going to be useful.
Yeah.
Science, I mean, you get past a certain point again with science. Like, what does she need that for?
Yeah.
She's a creative person.
Yeah.
She should be spending a lot more of her time doing creative subjects. But all of this is a rigid structure, like you said.
Yeah.
I wish they would free them up. I wish they would do problem solving. I wish they would do finance. I wish they would do economics. I wish they would do more of life skills. Yeah. Because those are the skills that will transcend any like technical evolutionary changes that like kill off large parts of the job system.
Yeah.
You know, they will be useful life skills, but we don't do it.
Yeah.
We just create robots who compete on memorizing facts. It's fucking dumb.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's getting better in that regard, but I do think also we need to be real about what is school. Like school for a lot of people, let's say a lot of students that come from maybe like hard households, or just in general is a place of hopefully stability. They can go during the day that the government in the US pays for. Their parents can go to work. And a lot of times, like, I don't remember anything from my high school days, barely college. But what I do remember from college, I remember those professors that had a profound impact on me and introduced me to topics and subjects that I researched. Similar to like, okay, this person had a profound impact on me with Bitcoin. Same thing with high school or elementary school. It's you remember people and how they made you feel. So I think if we're real about education, a 16-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 22-year-old isn't going to know what they want to do for the rest of their lives. I am a firm believer that you can always evolve. I mean, as you did with this podcast, right? Starting it like a few years ago, you were doing one thing, okay, pivot, something happens. I think that's real. So I think we just, again, like you said, teach students critical thinking, adaptability. Doesn't really matter the other subjects. You need to make sure they can read, write, do those kind of things. But I think if we're being real, that's what education should be about. And unfortunately, I think sometimes it comes down to individual teachers and people. Is that the type of person they are or not? But the structure isn't set up for that, no.
But you need them better teachers. You need to get better, brighter, more interesting teachers in there. And it's
a teacher shortage and staffing.
Because they don't pay them shit.
Yeah, correct.
They don't pay them shit.
And in the US, there's always a whole nother show we could have about the impacts of like COVID and just the societal angst everyone feels. But there's always, especially you guys in the UK and in Europe, even more so, but a lot more teacher strikes happening in the US, which again,
we've got that in the UK right now.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, healthcare is a whole other thing too. It's kind of similar in a way. And definitely like, I am definitely, kind of, registered Democrat, like proud of those that are striking, unionizing when need be and those kind of things. And first of all, I could never understand because I'm not in that position. But that's a reality. And there's not enough teachers in the system anyway. So a lot of them feel like they're used and abused. How well of a teacher do you think they're going to be if they feel like that?